This video relates to Project 6 of the ETA course. Now in Project 6 you have to plan, design and develop an assessment plan and the associated assessment instruments. So that's part A. In part B you're actually going to use those instruments and assess somebody using those assessments. But let's first start with part A, the plan and design part. So down here you can see what to do for part A. You're going to write a background to your assessment. You're then going to design and develop an assessment plan, and then you're going to design and develop the 3 assessment instruments to support this assessment plan. And then in part B you're going to assess the competence of a candidate using these 3 assessment instruments that you have developed. So let's have a look at the paperwork that needs to be completed. You don't need to do anything on this page, it's just the evidence to submit, and we use this to see if you've submitted everything we need. It might be helpful for you to have a look at to see what is going to be submitted. So the first thing you're going to actually do then for this project is write the background to your project. Now for this project you need to pick a unit of competency of your own choice, or you can use the unit that we have provided. The unit we provided was called MAR B026, Applying Knowledge of Marine Terminology and Port Procedures. So we've given you a hard copy of that, and also there will be a soft copy in the emailed documents. If you don't like that unit, you can pick any other unit of your choice to do this on. So you're going to make up in the background information a bit of a scenario of the reason for this assessment, the code and title of the unit being selected, and which pathway. And for this project 6 you have to pick training and assessment pathway. So it's definitely not an RPL project. And then you're going to give us a profile of typical candidates that will be assessed with this assessment tool. It does not have to be exactly the same person that you will be assessing later on. Once completing the background, the next step is to complete part 2, which is the assessment plan. Now this project 6 is very similar to what you did in project 4. So keep project 4 open and handy to refer to an example of how to do this project and the different documentation to be completed. We have also emailed you an example of an assessment plan, and that was on a unit called Provide Work Skill Instruction. So have a look at your emails. It was sent during the class, and you will see this example of a completed assessment plan. So have that handy as well to compare what you're doing with this assessment plan in project 6. So the top part is straightforward. You will keep most of this blank except for RTO and the competency standard. That's the name of the unit that you have selected with its name and code for this project. It will be a training and assessment pathway, so you're going to tick that box, and you can give it a name over here. Candidates will be blank for this time and assessors will be blank for now. Now further down you have to select your minimum of 3 methods of assessment. So with project 6 we recommend you have method number 1. That's going to go in here, will be through observation. So you can observe them doing something from that unit of competency, and the associated instrument will be the observation checklist, goes in there. In the second method we recommend for you to use is some written questions, and then method number 3 to be verbal questions. So once you've got your 3 methods, you can complete the rest of this table by looking at your example in project 4 as well as the example of an assessment plan that we have emailed. Once you've got this part of the plan sorted, you can then complete the next page, which is straightforward. Just look at the examples until you get to part 2b, the contextualization. Over here, you're going to write at least 50 words on how you've tailor-made this for your own industry or for your own RTO. So that just goes down in here. You can type it up or write it up by hand. Then we get to develop our first instrument to support that plan we wrote. And so if you go back, you will see our first method of assessment. Part A, the instrument is an observation checklist. And once again, and you complete this, you leave all of this blank because you're not using it yet. Although over here, you're going to type the name and code of the unit selected. You leave the date blank. Then over here, you're going to pick a specific task that relates to that unit of competency that you can observe while the candidate performs it as part of the assessment. So describe the task you will be giving to them. So once again, look at the examples. Candidate instructions, that's specifically for the candidate, what to do in this assessment. Here you describe the requirements for satisfactory completion. So you describe what they need to, how many steps they have to follow from the checklist, and how many of them they have to do in a particular order. Here we add some specific instructions for other assessors to help them use this assessment instrument in the way it was intended. So here you're going to list at least, let's say, 8 steps or 8 actions you want to see and witness while they perform that task. Once again, look at the examples, provided you don't complete anything down the bottom part here at all. You will use that later on. Then we're going to do instrument B, the second instrument, which is the written questions instrument. This is where you're going to design some written questions to be completed by the candidate as part of the assessment. So there you're going to list the name and code of the unit. You're going to leave this blank. You're going to leave that blank. You're going to give candidate instructions here of how to complete the questions, how much time they've got, how many of the questions they have to complete. Is it open book? Is it closed book? And over here, you're going to set the standard of how many questions they have to get correct to be able to get a satisfactory result. And over here, instructions for the assessors of how to use this assessment instrument. Further down this page, this is where you get opportunity to then make up your first question. And over here, you write or type your question in here. And so you might be able to say list this or describe this or give a definition of this or ask them a question. And then over here is where they can type up there. You type the answer to that question, or it is a space for them to write the answer. So first up, you're not going to put anything in there. You're first going to do a set of questions with no answers, and then you're going to do an answer sheet later on. So all you do at this point is type in your questions. So the first two in the template is for paragraph style question, or some people call them short answer questions. Then here is space to do true-false questions. So make up 2 statements, and then the candidate must circle whether it's true or false. Then there's a spot to do some multiple choice questions. So you word the question up here, and that question, the answer must be selected from this list. So 3 will most probably be incorrect and 1 will be correct, because it says circle the correct answer to each of the questions below. So 1 of these answers must be correct. So you're going to design 2 multiple choice questions. Put the question in there and you type the 4 possible answers, of which 3 is wrong and 1 is correct. And that makes up the question, written question checklist. You're not going to complete anything here at this stage. Then we're on to the final questions, which is verbal questions. Instrument, part C. Follows the same format. You're only going to complete the competency standard and its code there. Instructions to the candidate. You will be asked the following 6 verbal questions that you need to answer on the spot. It's open book or it's closed book, you decide that. Requirements for a satisfactory completion. How many of the questions do they have to get correct to get a satisfactory result? And once again, instructions to the assessors of how to use this instrument. Then we get down to the questions. So with the verbal questions, you make up a question here. List the 3 domains of learning, for example. The question will come straight from the unit of competency that you're using for this project. So let's say we say list the 3 of the adult learning principles, and then you would ask the question up here, and then down here you would then put in 3 of the adult learning principles. Or let's say it's the 3 domains of learning. You would have knowledge, skill, and attitude as the 3 answers you are looking for. And then over here in this area, you describe, for example, the candidate must get all 3 correct for a satisfactory result. So over here, that's the question. Over here, this here is what is the requirement from the candidate to get a satisfactory result for this question. And over here is the possible answers. Now, because these are verbal questions, the assessor has this in front of them. They read the question, tell the candidate what is the requirement, and then as they give the answers that you have typed in here, the assessor only ticks this box to say yes or no, they did get the answer correct or not. They decide for a satisfactory result or not for this question, and there's some room for some notes. Then over the page there is room for a second question, and it follows exactly the same format. You make up a question, you give us a guideline about what the requirements are for satisfactory completion, and then over here the possible answers or the answer you're looking for. So sometimes you might only use 1 line if there's only 1 answer to the question. If there's 3 answers you're looking for, you use all 3. If you have 5 answers you're looking for, you'll add in additional lines here so that there is room where the assessor can record the response. Once again, you don't complete this at this time. And then you do question 3, question 4, question 5, and 6. So there's room for 6 questions, and we require you to complete all 6 verbal questions with their answers. This is also not completed at this time. It's only when you use these that you complete this section. So now you have a plan for your assessment, and you have the 3 assessment instruments to conduct the assessment. And this is then where you can actually start part B of the, I'm just going to go scroll back to page 1. Here it talks about part B, assess competence. Assess the competence of a candidate. A little bit more here about that. So what you have to do in part B, identify somebody that you can trial this assessment on. Now, if you guys live in the same town or near each other, or you're going to meet up at work, then you can get together and use each other as candidates. But if you're up somewhere where you don't have that luxury, you might have to find a mate or a family member that you can assess. So you're going to make a copy of these three instruments. So you print out an additional copy of each of these instruments because you're going to use them during the assessment. And before you conduct the assessment, you can actually print out a second copy of the written questions. And you're going to, on that additional copy, you're going to write here at the top, marking guide / answer sheet. And then you're going to go through this part here and you're going to type in red or write in red the answers to the questions, so that you can send that to assessors as well and they know what answers you are looking for. So you've got one blank set of this, one with the answers, and another one without the answers, a third one that you're going to use when you assess your candidate. So once you're ready to conduct the assessment, you're going to have those three instruments ready. You will then only complete the candidate details on the documentation. So on each instrument, you're going to go back and complete, for example, on this one, the written questions. Now you know who you're going to assess. There's one person you've picked. You put their name in there. You know which date you're going to assess them. You put that in there. And if it asks for an assessor name, you also can now put in an assessor name because you will be the assessor. So you will sign this at the end. So you have your three instruments ready with candidate name and assessor name on them. And before you then actually conduct that assessment, let's call it an assessment role play, you're going to have to brief the candidate about the assessment. So as you know, we normally do this a couple of days before. You've done one of these before in Project 4, so please have a look at Project 4 for an example of how this is used. So you will then print the name of the candidate in there, print the name of the assessor in here, list the unit of competency in there, and the date the briefing was done. So ideally this will be a couple of days before the actual day of the assessment. You will work through this list with the candidate over the phone or in person, and you will be able to then tick each of these boxes as you discuss each area of the briefing. Once the candidate has been taken through all of this and they agree to be assessed, you get them to sign and date this briefing document, and also you as the assessor sign and date the briefing document. So that is done, and now you're ready to conduct the assessment. So on the day that your candidate arrives to conduct the assessment, you will have the three instruments with you. You have the checklist with you, the briefing checklist that is. And if you did this over the phone, you might have to get them to sign this when they come in on the day of the assessment. You might revisit a couple of these issues before you start the actual assessment, and then you write into it, and then you start off with instrument number 1, your observation checklist, and you thank them for showing up for the assessment, and you get straight into the assessment instrument number 1, the observation checklist. So the candidate's name should be in there already. Your name is in as the assessor, and the observation date is the date you're conducting this assessment. The rest should already be completed. Then you get to the observation checklist, and you will have at least 8 items here. You go up here, you give them this instruction here of what you want to observe. So you give them the task. For example, they have to conduct a pre-start check on a forklift. And then over here you've got listed all the steps involved in doing a pre-start check on a forklift. And you, as the assessor, stand and observe them while they do the pre-start check on the forklift, and you tick the boxes whether they are following each of these 8 or more steps. So you don't say too much during this process, you just observe them performing the task. And once they are done, You look at the number of ticks you've got here. You look at what you've set up as the requirement for satisfactory completion. For example, if you said at least 8 steps have to be completed in the order listed, you have a look, do I have at least 7 ticks here? And then you can select it as satisfactory. You can write some comments. If it's not yet satisfactory, then you have to write comments over here. And then you can assign and date it with your candidate, give them some feedback about this observation, and then you're ready to continue on with the written questions. So the candidate names are in there already, the date of the assessment is in there, and then you give them this list of questions. You give it physically to them. You've got a hard copy there, and they sit down and quietly read the questions and answer it. If you have decided that they have to complete these questions after the course and before the assessment date, you actually email or send a hard copy to them, and they complete this in their own time, and they either email it back or they scan and send it back to you in snail mail. So they complete all these questions, they return it to you, and you can then assess their answers by comparing it with the answer sheet that you have developed for this test. And so once again, based on the criteria you have set for this, because if you go up here, you would have set requirements for satisfactory completion. You have to get 5 of the 6 questions correct maybe. You go here and have a look at the answers, and if they've got the necessary number correct, you will tick satisfactory, write some comments, and then sign as the assessor and date the day of the assessment. And that takes care of assessment instrument number 2. And so we only have one more to go, and that is the verbal question checklist. So that most probably will happen just after the observation. You make sure that's all completed. You put the date in here, and you revisit the instructions to the candidate, how many questions there will be and what's the requirements for satisfactory completion. And then you just start and verbally ask these questions you have below. So you ask this question, they give you the answer, and if the answers are correct, you just tick the box of the correct answers that they have given you. So you would have had the answers in here, and then you can decide for this question it's satisfactory or not satisfactory, and room for notes. And you can move on to straight to question number 2. You read the question, you can tell them what the requirements are, and then as they give you the answers, you tick the necessary boxes. Now do remember, if there's only one answer, you're only going to have an answer up here, and then you will only be ticking that satisfactory or not. And so you go through all of the verbal questions by reading the questions and ticking the boxes for the answers provided. So you do that for all 6 questions, and then you make an overall decision whether for the 6 questions altogether if it is satisfactory or not. Once again, having a look at the requirement that you have set on page 1 of this instrument, if they have to get 5 of the 6 correct, or they have to get all 6 correct to get a satisfactory answer. A couple of comments in there, you sign and date it, and then your 3rd instrument is completed. So that is almost the end of the assessment, but not yet. You're going to go down here, and while the candidate is there, you're going to document the overall results of this assessment by completing the details up here. Over here you will tick whether the observation was satisfactory or not, the written questions satisfactory or not, and the verbal questions. So straight from those 3 instruments you get the end result, you indicate it over here, and then you've got to make the overall assessment decision whether based on these 3 instruments the candidate is competent or not yet competent. So 3 satisfactories will lead to an overall competent result. You can give some feedback, a couple of comments. If it is not yet competent, you have to put an action plan down here of how to prepare and when the reassessment will be. You, the assessor, signs and dates, and that takes care of the assessment results form. You give the candidate verbal feedback about the overall result, and then you can go to the final step, and that is ask the candidate to give you feedback on how they've experienced the assessment process. So some of this detail you can complete for them. You give them this sheet, they tick the boxes and provide it back to you. And that then normally is the end of the assessment process. In your case, to make for good evidence, you're also going to complete the self-reflection and action plan of what you've learned by completing this project. You can attach the unit of competency you selected for this project to the last page, and then you are ready to submit. So just to recap, if we go back to this page up here, evidence to submit, you're going to give us the background information that you've done. You're going to give us an assessment plan that you've done. You're going to contextualize that 50 or more words. You're going to give us that. You're going to give us the 3 assessment instruments you've designed. And then after you've conducted the assessment, you're going to give us the completed assessment brief checklist. You're going to give us the completed assessment instruments. So this is one set of blank instruments up here that has got no names in or dates. Here you're going to have those 3 documents over here completed. Here's the instruments, those 3, but this time they've got a candidate's name on it, they've got your name on it as the assessor, you've ticked boxes, you've made some notes, and so that is submitted at the back of this as assessment instruments being used. You're going to include the assessment results form that has been completed with your candidate name and all the boxes ticked, and then also the feedback form is included. You're also going to submit your self-reflection and action plan and a unit of the competency used for this project. And that will finish off project number 6, and then you should be ready to move on to one of the other projects. So I hope that this has been very useful for you in making sure you get your head around project 6, how to plan an assessment, develop the instruments, and conduct an assessment. Thank you.